Mike and David met at age 20, during their freshman year of college in Austin, Texas. David forgot his laptop at home, Mike gave him his, and they talked until the early hours. It turned out they were both fans of old-school programming, both hated jazz, both dreamed of starting their own business and never working for someone else. They became inseparable. They took exams together, hung out in the library together, ate ramen and drank cheap beer together when they couldn't even afford food. After college, they rented a garage and started coding for local stores. Their first project, a website for a bakery, brought in $300. They split the money, bought pizza, and vowed never betray each other. David was the brains. He came up with concepts, found clients, and negotiated. Mike was the hands and heart, coding until 3 in the morning, fixing bugs, and reassuring clients when something went wrong. They complemented each other like a puzzle. 5 years later, they had a small office, 10 employees, and an annual turnover of $500,000. 10 years later, the company was worth $8 million. 20 full-time developers, clients all over America, an office in downtown Austin overlooking the lake. Mike and David were the kings of their own little world. They bought houses next door, celebrated Christmas together, and went on family vacations. David's wife, Susan, told Mike, "You're like brothers, only closer." Mike believed it. He didn't know that David had been sleeping with his girlfriend for 2 years. Lauren had appeared in Mike's life 3 years before the crash. Beautiful, smart, with an easygoing personality and a firm grip. She worked at a marketing agency, helping the company with advertising. Mike fell in love at first sight. David recommended her himself, an excellent specialist, proven. Mike didn't know that David had already tested her, in bed. They met in hotels when Mike was away on business trips. David told Lauren, "He's not worthy of you. He's just a nerd with money." Lauren nodded, accepted gifts, slept with both of them, and squirreled away her plans. Everything fell apart on an ordinary Tuesday. Mike was planning to propose to Lauren. He bought a ring for $15,000, booked a table at the best restaurant, and arranged for musicians. He wanted to share his joy with David first. He walked into his office without knocking. They never knocked on each other's doors. David wasn't alone. A strange man in an expensive suit sat at his desk. On the desk lay documents bearing the logo of a competing company. "Mike, I can explain," David said, turning pale. "What is this?" "It's a deal." "What deal, David?" "We're not selling the company." David remained silent. The man in the suit stood up, shrugged, and left. Mike grabbed the documents. What he read made him sit up. David was selling the company. He hadn't just sold it. He'd already transferred 51% of the shares to front men, forged Mike's signature on the general power of attorney, and siphoned off almost all the money from the accounts. The company was worth $8 million. Mike should have gotten nothing. "Why?" Mike asked. His voice didn't waver. He was terribly calm. "I owe it," David whispered. "Games, Mike. I lost a huge amount of money. I owed it to people who don't forgive. If I hadn't paid, they would have killed me. And Susan. And the kids. You could have told me. You wouldn't understand. You're always so proper." Mike looked at his friend. 20 years. Thousands of nights in the garage. Millions of lines of code. Shared dreams. And it was all a lie. He didn't hit David. He didn't yell. He simply took the documents, left the office, and called his lawyer. His lawyer said, "Mike, this is ironclad. He transferred the shares through shell companies, the signatures were forged. We could sue for years. And we're out of money." Mike went outside. He got in his car and drove to Lauren's. She didn't answer the door. He called, but she hung up. He texted, "Lauren, what's going on?" She answered an hour later. "Sorry, I'm with David. It's been a year. You're a good man. But I'm better off with him." Mike sat in the car under her windows and looked at the light in her apartment. There, behind the curtains, the woman he loved was laughing with the man he trusted like a brother. He sat there until 3 in the morning. Then he went home and fired all his employees via email. A week later, he moved his things into the garage. The same one where they'd started. It was cold there, smelling of gasoline and old dreams. There was almost no money left. David had withdrawn everything. His friends turned away, afraid he'd ask for a loan. Susan, David's wife, didn't answer his phone. Mike was alone. The first year was hell. He worked as a delivery driver, delivering food in his old Honda, earning $40 a day. He slept in his car when he couldn't afford a motel. He showered at gas stations. It gets cold in Texas in the winter, and he'd warm up outside coffee shops, pretending to drink a latte. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He didn't complain. He simply survived. A year later, he got a job as a night watchman at a shopping mall. He slept during the day, worked at night, and wrote code in his free time. Old clients, those for whom he'd built websites early in his career, gravitated toward him, some out of pity, some out of respect. He took on cheap orders, delivered high-quality work, and never let them down. 3 years later, he had a company again. A small one, 5 people, in a basement. But it was making money. Mike rented an apartment, bought a decent car, and stopped fearing calls from debt collectors. 5 years later, he rented an office. Not by a lake, not in the center, in a residential area, above a laundromat. But it was his office. His name on the door. His victory. And then David came. Mike heard the doorbell ring at 10 in the morning. He opened it. A man he didn't recognize stood on the threshold. Dirty, thin, with shaking hands. In a cheap coat that was 3 sizes too big for him. "Mike," the man said. "It's me." The voice was instantly recognizable. David. He didn't look like a winner. He looked like a man who'd been run over and backed up by life, only to be run over again. "What do you want?" Mike asked. "A job," David whispered. "Please, I beg you," he told me. The money he got for the company went to pay off his debts. His partners screwed him. Lauren left him when his credit cards ran out. Susan took the kids and moved out. Now he's homeless, sick, nothing to eat. "You know I went through the same thing?" Mike asked. "Only you didn't throw me out on the street. You did it to me." "I know," David began to cry. "I regret it every day. Every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a job, at least as a janitor." Mike looked at him. At the man who stole everything from him. His business, his girlfriend, his faith in people. 20 years of his life that turned out to be a fake. He had the right to slam the door. He had the right to call the police. His sentence for forging signatures hadn't yet expired. He had the right to simply spit in his face. He did none of that. "Come tomorrow at 8, Mike said. "You'll be testing the software. Starting salary is $3,000. If you don't let me down, I'll give you a raise in 6 months. David didn't believe it. "Are you kidding? I've never been one to joke around. You know that." David fell to his knees. Mike lifted him up. "Don't, just work. That's all I ask." He closed the door, returned to his office, sat at his desk, and stared for a long moment. He hadn't forgiven David. He hadn't forgotten. But he understood one thing that couldn't be understood until he'd lost everything. Revenge doesn't heal. She only drains the energy needed to move on. David has been working at Mike's company for 2 years now. He's the first to arrive and the last to leave. He's never late, doesn't drink, doesn't complain. He doesn't ask for a raise. Doesn't bring up the past. He just works. Sometimes Mike notices David looking at him with gratitude bordering on worship. Mike turns away. They're not friends. They'll never be. But they're colleagues. And that's enough. Lauren married someone else. A banker from Dallas. Mike saw her photos on social media. She smiled. He felt nothing. No pain, no anger, no nostalgia. Just a slight surprise. How could he love a woman who slept with his best friend behind his back? Mike never married. He'd had women, but none of them stayed. He told himself he simply hadn't found the one. Or maybe he was afraid to trust again. Sometimes at night, when the city outside grew quiet, he thought about that day, Tuesday, when everything had collapsed. About David, sitting at a desk with a competitor. About Lauren, who didn't answer the door. About the documents with someone else's signature. He didn't regret giving David the job. It wasn't generosity. It was calculation. David knew the code better than any of his employees. He was worth those $3,000. And maybe a little revenge was forcing the traitor to see every day what he'd built without him. Or maybe Mike was simply tired of hating. He doesn't know the answer. And he probably never will. But every morning, when he walks into the office, he sees David cleaning the coffee machine, brewing coffee, sorting out papers. And he greets him like any other employee, neither warm nor cold. Simply, "Good morning, David, we're working." And that, perhaps, is victory.